All right, Joe, we are back on the podcast where we are training men in spiritual fitness. And we are talking now in this season of the podcast about 7 marks of godly character, 7 virtues of godly character. And this week, as I was thinking about what we'd be talking about on the podcast, I was actually heard a story that I've heard, honestly, 1,000 times. Joe, it's a story that you've probably heard 1,000 times. The basics of the story are that's 2 guys sitting next to each other on a train. One guy is obviously a little older, a little wiser than the other, but it really focuses on the younger guy. There's this younger guy he's tired, exhausted. He's obviously facing difficulty in life, some sort of difficult circumstance, difficult decision that he has to make, and he doesn't know what to do. He's kind of in a place in life where he's just headed nowhere. And so he eventually turns to this other guy on the train, and he's looking for advice. What do I do? I'm exhausted. I'm facing a difficult situation. I feel like I'm headed nowhere. And the older guy, he tells them words that every man that grew up in the 90s knows. He says, son, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away. You know this, right, Joe?
Kenny Rogers,
know
man.
when to run. That's it. It's a great Kenny Rogers song, right? It's a great story that we probably, I don't know if this translates to guys in Scotland, but at least for guys here in America, you know this song well. But no, I thought about that because I think that there are a lot of Christian men who can identify with that younger guy on the train. They're guys that feel like they are on a train bound for nowhere. They feel tired, exhausted. They face difficult situations every day. And if I could sum up how a lot of guys respond to this situation, they just say, you know what? I quit. They wake up and they just say, you know what? I'm just going to quit whatever's headed my way. So I want to put you now, Joe, in the position of that other guy on the train. There's this guy it seems like he's bound for nowhere, facing difficulties, and he turns to you for advice. What do you tell that guy?
Well, I think we all as men need to be honest. I think we talk about hating quitting, not wanting to be a quitter. The fact is that we all quit a lot of good things in our life. And we all have a lot of regrets that we haven't kept up things that maybe we intended to do in the past. And so I think what we need to think about as men is the willingness to persist and effort with good intentions over time when we have good priorities. And when it comes to what is that thing that when things get difficult pushes us forward, now we're talking about diligence. And a lot of guys need to hear that to be diligent in the activities, the disciplines, the relationships that promote the kind of life that we want to live, we've got to be committed to that diligence. And so this is a virtue that all of us need to be willing to grow in.
Yeah. So the virtue we want to point guys towards today is just exactly that, diligence. Guys, you need, in the moments of life, and there's a lot of them, when you feel like throwing in the towel, the virtue you need is diligence to carry you forward. So I guess the best way to start talking about this, that I think at least, is I want to throw you some of the things that guys do say. And then you maybe give some definition to diligence for these guys in this situation. A lot of them are exactly what this guy on the train said. But here's one thing guys are saying a lot in their daily life. They wake up and they say, you know what? It's too hard. Whatever it is that they're facing, it's too hard. So what would you say to that guy?
Yeah, well, if we're going to define diligence, one way of defining it is, persistent effort in spite of difficulty. And a lot of what we're called to as Christian men is extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah.
Putting to death something like pride or ego, that, tendency to exalt ourself, our own desires and wants above the good of other people. I mean, this is something that it's not outside of us, it's evil that's inside of us. So that's not the only example of difficulty, but if you just take that whole aspect of fighting against sin, which is such a key thing that we're trying to do in terms of training with cross-training, guys have to realize it's going to be difficult. So you're going to need diligence, persistent effort in spite of difficulty.
That's good. Yeah. I had a conversation earlier this week with a buddy, and we were commiserating on the difficulties of raising teenagers. And just, how we have to kind of preach even diligence to teenagers, because teenagers, they wake up and they think the hurdle in front of them is so big. And part of being a parent is trying to convince you the hurdle in front of you isn't that big. Like teenagers wake up and the hurdle in front of them is math. And then they're like, this is really big. And I'm like, I woke up and the hurdle in front of me was mortgage payment. Like I'll trade you hurdles, But this is one of those things as growing and maturing men, it's like coming to realize, man, if I just quit everything, if my default is to just quit everything that is difficult, how are you going to survive marriage? How are you going to survive career? How are you going to actually push through, like you talked about, the bigger, deeper things of fighting sin? So quitting when it's difficult and not just showing up isn't the option there. But yeah, I like how you said persistent effort despite difficulty. All right, here's another one that I hear from guys. I'm just too tired. I got a lot going on. I am too tired. What does diligence have to say to that guy?
Yeah. Again, diligence is what, tells us that we need to have persistent effort in spite of tiredness. And, part of the challenge of being a maturing man is responsibility is constantly, it's always increasing. And, that water, right when you think it's, as high as it can get, it just gets a little bit higher and your mouth's just barely, able to be above it and breathing. And, there's going to be mornings we're going to be tired, but in spite of the tiredness, to be diligent to get up, to start our day protecting our family by praying for them, getting our heart right so we have the wisdom for the day by spending time in God's word. We're going to be tired. And diligence is often, in spite of tiredness, continuing to put forth effort in things that we know are of fundamental significance.
Yeah, I know a lot of guys wake up and they feel exhausted. However, I know they haven't exhausted every opportunity for to do what they need to do. That's the difference there. Like, I know we feel exhausted, but have we really exhausted every opportunity to grow and to change and to push through? And that's diligence, exhausting every opportunity, persisting no matter what, even when you're tired. All right, here's another one. I just don't care. Like, I don't care. I just don't care. So what does diligence say to that guy?
Yeah. So again, to go back to what it is, diligence, persistent effort in spite of, and I'm just going to say in spite of boredom or in spite of apathy. And one of the things that's important as Christians is to realize that typically when we think of being just unmotivated, we think of that as being the absence of any kind of passion, any kind of motivation within our heart. But Christian wisdom tells us otherwise. There's something called sloth. And that sloth is actually a sinful passion. And these times when we're unmotivated to do things that are really, really important, it's not because there's no motivation. It's actually because there's the wrong kind of passion that's in our heart. And somebody who's got a great definition of that attitude or that passion of sloth is Dorothy Sayers. And I'll just read her definition of sloth. She says, sloth is the sin that believes in nothing, cares for nothing, enjoys nothing, loves nothing, hates nothing, finds purpose in nothing, lives for nothing, and remains alive only because there is nothing it would die for. Again, that's not the absence of anything. It's actually this sinister sloth that's come into the heart that's made us not care about things that ought to be motivating to us. And what do you do in those moments where you have sloth in your heart? Well, you don't just give up. Persistent effort in spite of sloth. That's what diligence calls us to.
That's excellent. So if we could define diligence, then we'd say persistent effort in spite of things like difficulty, tiredness, boredom. Requiring that persistent effort over time is the key. And that's, if you want to conquer sloth and overcome sloth, like you're saying, diligence is it. Diligence is the key. And I think that's one of the things, big picture, we want guys to see through this season of the podcast is we know that there are sins that guys need to fight. Things like sloth that is deeply seated, but you also need a virtue to pursue. That diligence is that virtue that is going to overtake sloth. So we kind of talked a little bit about the things that guys are saying that maybe are that negative, like, okay, I'm too tired, I'm bored, or whatever. Let's take the other end. I think there are some things that guys really want, guys that are really deeply they want, but they don't quite know how to get there. And I think diligence can unlock the key to get there. So here's I got three more things that I hear guys saying that I think diligence can help with. The first is this: I want abundance. I think guys really do. They want abundance in their lives. So how does diligence help in that?
Yeah. The Proverbs, it talks a lot about this virtue of diligence. It tells the sluggard to look to the ants that model the kind of diligent storing up for later. But It also says things like this, Proverbs 10:4, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes it rich. Or Proverbs 21:5, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance. And this is just basic wisdom. I mean, we're not even at this point talking about spiritual goods versus just kind of worldly goods. Just the general truth is, you look out into the world, and most of the people who have abundance, whether it's abundance of wealth, whether it's abundance of wisdom that they've stored up through their life, abundance of knowledge or expertise or experience, it's the people who have diligently pursued particular goals or particular ends through life that end up with an abundance of whatever they're after. And I think this is often true, even if we put it in like the context of ministry, the people that we look at that achieve so much, it's not because they're some kind of genius. It's typically just because they were really diligent. And I think one of my favorite examples of that is William Carey, who this remarkable kind of father of modern missions. I mean, he's involved with translating the Bible into like almost 30 different languages. And at one point he's asked kind of what his genius is. And his answer is, my genius is plodding. All I can do is plod away. And it was simply day after day, he took little small steps, but he had a definite direction. And the end result of a lifetime is he had achieved remarkable things. And so when guys are saying, I want abundance, I mean, I'd love for them to think about what they want abundance of, but they need to know that, I mean, the road to abundance is diligent pursuit in spite of difficulty.
Yeah, I like how you said that, small steps over a long period of time. That's the key that we see. I mean, in anybody that you look at that's successful, it's generally not one big breakthrough, but it is these small steps over a long time. Persistence being the key there, and then not giving up despite the difficulty there. And I think that there is a way that diligence is immediately attractive to every man. Like, there's this sense that even Christian or non-Christian, the idea of diligence is attractive, right? The idea of being able to be that kind of guy, to have that as a kind of an identity and a virtue that you have. But I think this gets even more important when we start talking about, okay, what does this look like spiritually? Because it's one thing for every guy, including Christians, to say, I want abundance. And okay, diligence is a pathway there. And even the Bible says that. You said that, looking at Proverbs. But what about guys that are saying, here's another thing guys are saying, I want intimacy with God. And I think that's one thing that guys are saying, I desire intimacy with God. Can diligence get me there?
Yeah, I think the danger when God feels absent is to think, well, there's nothing I can do. Because in one sense, there is nothing. I mean, we're not some sort of pagan that, like the prophets of Baal that cut ourselves and, stir up God in heaven. There is this sense where his approach is his initiative. However, the scriptures, they challenge our apathy. And I think one of the places to see this, if you go to Song of Solomon, not a book that guys probably spend much time in, but there's this moment, you've got this whole kind of relationship between the lover and the beloved. And the beloved, there's this bride type figure. She's in her home and she hears the groom, she hears her lover knocking at the door, and she delays. And what she then does is she gets up and she opens the door. And when she gets there, he's not outside any longer. And what's interesting is what she does next. She could just, throw up her hands in the air and be really sad and mourn and go back to sleep. But she doesn't. She goes out into the streets and she looks for her lover. She goes and she asks the night watchman. And what Christian teachers have taught throughout the centuries has been that image is a picture of what we should do when God feels absent, or when we find our heart with slothfulness, when we find our sense, that spirit of apathy within us. The wrong thing in those moments is to give up and just throw in the towel and say, you know what, I'm not going to go to church this week. I'm not going to wake up and read my Bible. The right thing is to go and chase after God and to look for him in all the places that we've met with him before, recognizing he's got to show up, but he tends to show up in those places he's told us to meet him at. And this is the exact advice. There's a great, he's an old Christian teacher, Bernard of Clairvaux, but he says, when you feel weighed down by apathy, lukewarmness, and fatigue, do not yield to cowardice and cease to study spiritual truth, but look for the hand of the one who can help you, begging like the bride to be drawn until finally, under the influence of grace, you feel the vigorous pulse of love. And so again, what he's saying is that don't give up, but plead with God. Go look for him and wait for that place, that time that he pours himself back out and reveals his love to us.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, that persistent effort. I love the image there that you created of chasing after God. When you feel like you're not intimate with God, it's not quit, not sit and cower. Run and chase after. I think, guys, man, we get it in our other relationships with other people, especially you talk about marriage and stuff. If you tell your wife, hey, I'd like to be more intimate more often, those kind of, okay, persistent effort over time in a relationship is what it's going to take, right? You can't just have a 20-year marriage and give up at year 5 and expect 15 years later, we're going to be intimate and have a great relationship. That doesn't happen. The people that have long, healthy, wonderful, intimate marriages, it's persistent effort over time. And the same is true with our relationship with God. We can't, I'm a Christian and that's it. I kind of give up 5 years in. Persistent effort over time. That diligence leads to the intimacy with God. All right, here's the last one I'd say guys are looking for. I want maturity. Guys do. They're looking for. Guys want to be that other guy on the train, in the Song of the Game. They want to be that older guy that's able to give the wisdom to other people. They want to be mature and they want to know when to hold them and when to fold. They just want to know, And what does diligence say to the guy that just wants to know, wants to be mature?
Yeah, the wrong mentality is, I think a lot of guys, it's like when you're a teenage boy and you're waiting to hit your growth spurt. And, I mean, what can you do? You just go to sleep, you eat, and then one day, you wake up and you're a couple inches taller. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to be a mature man, I sure hope God gives me this growth spurt. And I just wake up one day and I'm a head taller than I used to be. And that's just not the message of the New Testament. And, we could look at any number of passages. I'm just going to pick one from 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5. But what he says is, for this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue with knowledge, knowledge with self-control, self-control with steadfastness, steadfastness with godliness, godliness with brotherly kindness, and brotherly kindness with love. Now, notice he says, make every effort, that in a sense that one of these things would mature into the other and that they, like links of the chain, would be added to each other. But his expectation is that none of this is just going to happen by itself. And in the same letter, we hear Peter saying later in chapter 3, verse 14, be diligent to be found in Christ without spot, without blemish. So again, that idea that if we want to be holy and pure, it's not just going to happen passively, but it's something we have to diligently pursue. And that's just the message throughout the New Testament that whether it's Paul telling Timothy, be diligent to present yourself to God as one approved, or whether it's Hebrews talking about, be diligent to enter into the rest that God holds before us. That call is that there's something that we've got to do on our part, that if we're persistent in spite of difficulty over time, what happens is all of a sudden we start to see some of this fruit begin to reveal itself in us.
Yeah, it's not going to happen just overnight. You're not going to just wake up and all of a sudden, I'm mature. This is a persistent effort over time. I like the visual you gave there. And I think that, again, this is something guys want, guys need. Guys, that. You're out there listening. You're saying, yes, I want to be mature. I want intimacy with God. I want abundance in my life. And what we'd want to point you to today is you need diligence. You need to pursue diligence. You need persistent effort. And I think that's the key here for guys who want to grow spiritually. This is a podcast aimed at Christian men, a lot of Christian men who are stuck and who have hit a low ceiling of growth. And to those guys, I'd say persistent effort, despite difficulty, despite tiredness, despite boredom, and all of those things. What we all need is that persistent effort. And this is one of the virtues that we've just got to grow in. This is one of the virtues we've got to continue to pursue. As we kill sloth, we've got to pursue this virtue of diligence. So I think maybe a good place to land and to point guys towards this week, if that's you and you're kind of wanting to take that next step of pursuing diligence. I like the verse there that you mentioned. What was it? 2 Peter 1, 5-7. I don't know. I think just telling guys, why don't you just meditate on that this week? I think meditate, just as I heard you read that, I think that would be a great practice to just make an exercise of meditating on those set of verses, 2 Peter 1:5-7. I'll put that in the show notes. Man, take time to meditate on that this week. See what it does to you. See if it lights you up and gets you to the place where, okay, persistent effort over time. That's what I need to grow in intimacy with God, to grow into maturity. So y'all try that out. And then y'all come back next week and we're going to continue talking about the virtues of godly character.